So whenever you have a question in middle of this, you should please raise your hands. You can stop me wherever, and then we'll continue from there, right? It's not structured in a linear path, so for your questions, I'll have answers within. That's how I have created this deck. All right. So DeSci, or decentralized science, there were some forefathers to DeSci: open science and meta science. I know, I met a lot of people from open science as meta science here. And why we need DeSci? So what is the problem with current traditional science and why we need DeSci? So there is a huge decline of disruptive science. When you compare it with 1950s and today, you have, I would say, like 10x more scientists than what we had in 1950. Then it should be more science, right? So this recent Nature review that came out, I think 2023, shows how disruptive science is declining. What is disruptive science? Science creating disruptive solutions. That is disruptive science. So you can see in different scientific fields, the disruptive nature of it is reducing, right? It is not incremental anymore. And what is the reason for this? Yeah, please go on. So, yeah, disruptive science, for example, invention of discovery of penicillin, right? This is disruptive. Also like relativity theory, something that is, which creates a change in the entire field is what we call disruptive science. So there is certain metrics they use to measure the CD, the descriptive index. Basically, they took in manuscripts and patents coming from a particular study, and then they evaluated the CD index. Yeah, go on. Somewhere in 1940. Yeah, starts from 1940. Yeah. So we have more scientists, but the science is not disruptive anymore. There are some reasons for this. These are the reasons in traditional science. I'm more focusing on biological life sciences here because I come from the field. I have more grasping towards what is happening in the industry. So the first problem is funding. So funding is asymmetric. How does funding happen? How does science get funded? Do you guys know who funds science? Huh? The public, pharma, government. Any more? DeSci? Industry? Okay, so we have answers. So where does the government get money from? People. So taxes, right? So we fund science, basically. We fund science, but what happens is we don't have access to science. Even if a publication comes out of a scientific research, it is behind a paywall. You cannot access it. So that is the problem with traditional science, because there is no dialogue between the funders and the end users. Like, we are the end users, we are the funders. So there is no dialogue between the citizens and the science, right? So it is very much centralized. You have pharma, you have governmental funding agencies, you have big corporates which fund science. And there is also two more crises within traditional science, that is replication crisis, because people don't tend to share their negative results. So we are like, seasoned to only share positive results. So because of this, failing to report negative results, the science is not collaborative enough, science is not open enough to mitigate these replication crisis problems. And yeah, science has become very competitive, hyper-competitive in these regions, and you can see this starking thing where young academics go through incredible stress. I was one among them who went through incredible stress, because if you see in a traditional science setup, funding and publishing plays hand in hand, okay? And their manifestations trickle down to the bottom, where PhDs, postdocs are overstressed, overworked, with misaligned incentives. So these are like some of the problems in traditional science. And if you think, okay, this is the main overarching problems. Yeah. Yes. It is asymmetric. I'm saying funding is asymmetric. Certain diseases are not funded equally. Like, let's say hair loss. The government body would, a government central agency would not fund hair loss research. Maybe hair loss is a big problem for me. I have money, but I cannot invent a solution for myself. That's what I'm saying. It is asymmetric. So funding goes in certain areas where the central authority decide where it should go. That's the funding angle I was talking about. Yeah.
When we speak replication, wouldn't replication also cater to like what we call, we have found, we started going too deep in the same field and become very concentrated in the same field. So when you say that now we replicate more than we did in the past, so are you saying in the past they were producing more failure result was more public?
Yes, so they would also publish the failure results, like what happened, how did they do, how did they come up to this. So they share their whole failure stories as well. But here what's happening now is, let's say if you do execute a research, what someone did, if you try to replicate, you would not get the same results. There are a lot of other factors though. For biology, there are other reasons why it is not replicatable to an extent. But it is a crisis because the data, the negative results are not shared publicly. It's not open, right? We are incentivized to share only positive results.
See, I have a question and I want to leave it as a question itself, right? Like, in the second slide, when we say decline in
Yes.
scientific innovations, I'm not sure if it is because of, a lot of things that are supposed to be found are already found, and there are very few things to be found, right? Like, that can be one angle of thought. So I'm not able to correlate, these are the exact
Yeah.
problems that have led to that kind of decline.
So these are the problems which made science so rigid, so it is not as disruptive as it is anymore, right? So we could it's not like everything is found. We can still accelerate. So if you look at electronics, it has penetrated our life. You have a mobile. We are primitive cyborgs. We are attached to a device, kind of. But if you think of biology, it's not that accessible enough, the biotech in itself. So in that way, I'm saying these are some of the shackles of traditional science. Yeah. So when we say, so let's go deep into the life sciences industry. And one big industry is the pharma industry. We talked about government incentives like the funding authorities and stuff. And now there is this pharma. Like, how does a drug discovery happens? So there'll be like thousands of molecules, and there is one disease target. They want to find a match. That's the whole process. In this, they tested on series of animal models and clinical trials with patients and normal people, and then they see its efficacy, safety, and then the market, and the drug hits the market. So this percentage here, it's not so clear here. So the percentage is how much drugs from this phase enters the next phase, okay? So if you think of preclinical, which takes 4.5 years, close to 5 years, where you test your drug on animal models to prove, okay, this kind of will work. And then only 50% of that translates to the next stage. That means only 50% succeeds in the next clinical stage. And then if you look at the cost overall, to bring a drug into a market, it takes 12 to 15 years and close to $2.6 billion US to bring one drug into a market. And imagine how much a pharma company would charge this drug for. It's 12 years of compounding effort to bring one drug molecule to the market. So why is this happening? Why we are dumping so much money and the results are, why is it taking so long? What is the problem? So here is what we call it, valley of death. So there is a translational gap between the initial discovery phase and then the final phase 3 clinical trial is where finally you test with people, like real test conditions. So there is a translation gap because of misaligned incentives. One, government funding is limited, and then they have certain targets. They only go to specific research areas. So it is asymmetric, as I said. And then if you look at VCs and pharmas, they only go for profit. They are profit-driven, not impact-driven. And patients who create real value in this ecosystem, because they are the end users, and you are creating a solution for these end users, they have no dialogue or they have no voice in the system, in a traditional science system. And because of this comes a translation gap where things are very rigid, very slow. There is no lot of integrations. If you integrate academic science with the sort of pharma science and drive solutions which really align with users. Let's say you create a dialogue. You ask a patient, what does he go through when he goes through depression, right? First, start your study from taking a patient interview. Get to know that. Rather than you have a target, you need a drug to fit the target, and then you trying to find a market fit for the product. First, ask from the market, what is the product that is needed? Then decide in the study in a reverse order. Then decide which animal models to test. Then decide what sort of clinical trials setup we have to do, what should be the dosage, what sort of features that these patients are asking. It should be in this sort of reverse order, right? Like first putting patients. And so this is ultimately what traditional science at the current stages. There are scientists on the one side. Maybe they can be from pharma, they can be from academia, or they can be citizen scientists. And then there are citizens who are the end users, who want solutions, who go through struggle, but there is no dialogue happening. And to solve this, we need new solutions. So who is breaking this bridge? There are certain gatekeepers, right? Traditional academic funding agencies, not academia, but the funding agencies, publishing houses, and then you have big pharma. So they are the gatekeepers of science. They are not letting you to have a dialogue. In this case, Decentralized tries to remove these gatekeepers because the gatekeepers are there to create trust with our money. Like, if you're giving $10 that should go to a research, you are trusting them to do this. We can do that. We can replace that with blockchain, which is way more trustable. You can easily, retain ownership over your thing. You can attest stuff. Once you record a raw data, you can make sure who collected this data, to whom it belongs to. And all of this is possible with blockchain. So that's why we adopted blockchain as one of the means to, decentralize science. So so we saw how pharma works. This is pain of academicians who do PhDs and postdocs, how it happens, professors and all. So they generally start with writing a grant proposal for a research project. And there are two possibilities. If it is a hot topic, you get funded. If it is a moonshot, there's no funding because the central agency's vision is not aligned with the moonshot that you are proposing. So then you go back, again write a new proposal. If you are still if you get to, somehow come to within the hot topic area, you get funded. So once the funding so it takes 1 year, more, plus or minus 1 year. I think more than 6 months. 6 months is the baseline, I would say, to get a grant success. And then you have to deal with n number of bureaucracies, right? Like, what do you do with the funding? Then with the funding comes a lot of pressure. The funding agency asks you to publish certain numbers of papers in a particular year, and this pressure trickles down to the bottom, even to the graduates level, undergrads level. And then you do science, but you don't own the IP. The IP is with the university. For an inventor, there is no, so you might have a shared ownership, but you don't own your invention totally. And then you want to publish this, write papers, and publish. So the next step is, if you have more citations, you would become a tenure-track professor. If you have very less citations, you would leave academia, and go into industry. So it's a path that anyone can choose in academia. And so there are other academics who would review these papers. And then if you are, again, like you would go for grant proposal and all of this. So it's a very painstaking process. Our goal in decentralized sciences, scientists should do science. That's it. Let them do science. Don't involve them in bureaucracies. Don't make them spend times in writing grant proposals. Let them just do science. So that's how, so what I'm showing here is one of the platforms that we created. It's not a marketing thing. It is to show, it is easy that I demonstrated how it works. So okay, you can see it. So what you are seeing here, it's a marketplace for science projects. It's called Catalyst. You are seeing, whatever you are seeing here is, they are all different science projects that's been funded using crypto, okay? For example, let's check HempNet. It's one of the project. So this project, once you click HempNet, so you can see who is the researcher. There is the picture of this researcher, and he's from the Institute of Austrian Center for Industrial Biotechnology, Jörg Gubitz. So what is the impact? So these guys are trying to solve one of the problems in fashion industry. You know hemp, right? Hemp is a crop which can be used as a fiber for textiles. And this hemp fibers are not extensively used as in par with cotton because they are sturdy and rough. And what these guys are trying to do is to use some bioenzymes to make it softer, functional, water resistant, and stuff like that. So it's a science project. So what they did write everything: summary, problem statement, what sort of solution they are going to do, what's the commercialization potential, how would they use funding. So they gave all information, what they want to do, why they want to do this. And then funders come, they will fill this 47 ETH, that is the funding goal. And once the 47 ETH is raised, the project will get tokenized, and I'll explain like how tokenizing works. So this is how we are funding science now. So now I'm gonna show you this project just for example. This Percepta project raised 127 ETH, which is close to 500K US dollars. Can you guys give me a number how much time it would have taken to raise this much fund for this project? Just random numbers. 10 days? Okay. 2 months. 1 month. 2 days. Huh? The project is about a supplement to boost brain health, memory power, and stuff like that. Yeah? Yeah. So it took 60 minutes to fund this project. 60 minutes. Fastest science funding ever.
What is the landing page
It's Catalyst. Yeah. Which one? The boosting the brain. So they are repurposing a plant called cat's claw, which is found in Amazon rainforest, to develop, a supplement. You guys can go into it and read through it. You have a entire set of information regarding this, project docs, review, and all of this. And you can make an informed decision whether you want to fund or not fund. There are also risks involved in funding a science project because it's not always successful. Yeah. So I was, yep.
It looks like very much like crowdsourcing.
True. It's like a crowdfunding. Yeah.
What is the key difference with the research?
Yeah. So it's a crowdfunding platform for science, as you said correctly. So I said tokenization. So this is how it works, on blockchain. So when we fund a project, so we create 4 things. One is intellectual property, which is not there yet. It's gonna be there in future. So we are putting a forward-looking intellectual property, right? Because when you fund this research, after 1 year, something novel is going to come out, be it positive or negative. Something new is going to emerge out of this research. That is called intellectual property. Then there are patent licenses. Let's say anything is attached to it, previous licenses, or in future if there is going to be any licenses. And then you have a research agreement, like how the funding will be used, and all of this will be put in an agreement, like how funders gave this funding, what are the powers they have, and all of this. And then you have smart contracts to execute these things on chain. So we combine all of this to mint an IP NFT. So it is like an NFT, which is unique, non-fungible, but here it's not a song or a picture, it's a science project, okay, and an intellectual property.
Is there reputation also associated with this?
Repetition?
Reputation.
Reputation?
Yeah, because you can take the money and not do it. What happens when you?
So this research agreement, right? This enforce everything legally.
What if you fail at the project, right? Which is also plausibility in science.
I just read it, and you only get the money once you execute certain contracts. You don't get it all.
So there is like periodic release of funds. So after IP NFT is minted, we are going to tokenize this IP NFT into IPTs. These are intellectual property tokens. So let's say out of that 127 ETH, you contributed 1 ETH. So you're going to get respective amount of ETH for whatever you contributed, respective amount of IP tokens. So what does IP tokens mean? IP tokens represent governance power. It doesn't represent any financial power. It just gives you governance power to drive the science project. Let's say now the supplement came out, whatever you funded. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to license it to a pharma? Or do you want to spin a startup out of it? Do you want to license it to a supplement company and make financial incentives back to you? It's all up to you, all up to the funders. The funders write proposals, and they vote for it, what they want to do with the science project that they funded, okay? But you don't have ownership. So as a collective, all funders as a collective have ownership. As an individual, you have only governance rights. The ownership is with the inventor and the collective which funded, okay? So there is a difference. You don't have ownership over it. You just have funding rights. You just have governance rights. Yeah, fractional ownership. As of now, we are in this gray area where we are now giving only governance rights, because once you give ownership, then it becomes securities. Then another legal thing you have to solve. But we leave it up to the funders. If the funders decide to write off financial incentives for themselves, they can do. It's their own legal liability they have to go with. Yeah. So this is giving power to the citizens to drive science. Now there are no gatekeepers. There is just chain in front of you. There is supply side, which is putting up science projects. There is demand side, which you have funds, fund the projects, govern the projects.
In the patent document, apart from the inventor, is the name of the DAO written, or how does it work?
So it's all unique case, unique negotiation cases. Sometimes if you pay the university good enough overhead costs, that you are taking up all the overhead costs, then the university would agree to to share the ownership with the inventor and the funding body, which can be a DAO, or which can be fringe funders, like single individual funders. That can be done. Sometimes university wants a piece of it. They want a ownership piece of it.
In cases of, like, let's say, independent researchers, so not
Citizen scientists who would just go into a lab and do it. Yeah. They would register themselves as a LLC or a startup, and then they would get this fund. You need to be a legal entity to get the funds.
but in the patent document, when you're filing with the respective government, if you tokenize it, do all the people, they have to write their name in it?
No, you don't have to. So the governance rights is something that, so let's say this decision is to be taken, right? Are we gonna file a patent in US? So the funders would decide whether they are going to do it or not. Anything and everything, all decisions will be taken by the funders.
But as an inventor, I could just go ahead and file it. Then is it a reputational loss only, or is there
It's a reputational loss, and you are going against the contract. Yeah. Yes.
How do you decide who gets on the platform? Which project
So earlier it was a pilot phase. So we decided like we picked up projects and we trained, like we kind of did all of this due diligence and all of this, and we put first aid projects. Yeah. Yeah. Then now it's an open platform. Now it is a legit science project. It's, let's say, yeah, so now it is an open platform. Anyone can come put. So Catalyst is not the only platform, okay? Catalyst is something that's there where you can use in this format. There's also crowd sale. There are other formats in which you can use. But the base of how all of this work is this model. You would mint an IP NFT and then IPT tokens.
This is tokenization. What about
Yeah.
technology? Like curation, who is curating these projects?
So that's where new players come into this picture, because you can ask, right? Like, if I'm leaving all the decisions to funders, if the funders if the funders doesn't have enough expertise to, judge this research or to, guide this research project, then that's where these guys come in, BioDAOs, right? So BioDAOs are communities within a community where you have a community of scientists, Web3 developers, builders, funders, citizens, patient groups, right? All of them. It can be, anyone can participate. I'm just picking up certain groups, right? So what happens is they have a vested interest on a particular domain that they want to invest on. For example, take VitaDAO, which is into longevity research, right? So any projects that is coming to Catalyst or this sort of model, VitaDAO would take a role of stewardship. They come as stewards or shepherds for this project. They represent the vested interest of all the funders. So because they have expertise, they have expert communities, they are vision aligned. It's not, again, a single organization, like single person, like sole centralized entity. It is a community that has vested interest in it. So DAOs come into picture to guide these projects, to shepherd these projects. If a normal funder, like a layman who doesn't know enough science to judge the project, DAO would kind of, play that role to communicate science to these lay audience. Yeah. So they are the bridge.
Somebody asked already about reputation management, right? Like, as we all know, the biggest problem with all these new platforms is rugs.
Rugs.
Yeah, people just like run away with the money or wrap the project or something like that.
So you mean with the DAOs?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the tokens.
With the tokens. Okay. Okay. With the IP tokens. Okay. So
It can be a slow thing saying, 1 year they will probably like put up some stories online, and then after 1 year they
So-
switch off and say nothing happened on the project.
So yeah, so what happens is we work with universities and we have legal contracts that work in real world. It's not just smart contracts and everything is on chain. We have a legal contract because university doesn't work still. They don't take Web3 cryptocurrencies as funding. We transfer it into fiat. We enforce a contract that who is the funding agency, because everyone who is involved in it should be a legal entity, should be physically, registered as a legal entity. Then only this contract will move. The funders doesn't have to be, but whoever is representing the funders has to be a legal entity. Even if the DAO, it should be legally wrapped to sign the contract. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So there are whales in these DAOs.
The simple way to put it is how do you do trust without gatekeepers?
So there are gatekeepers. In the DAOs, I would not call them gatekeepers, but there are whales who can make a huge influence on the DAO's decision. That's why we need a lot of people to enter these DAOs to make it more democratic, right? So the first generation DAOs had a lot of whales because it's a new concept of BioDAOs. They needed that centralization to drive these projects to set a benchmark, right? But there are like new generational BioDAOs coming up, and these DAOs are rethinking on their governance and their gated ways to, to share their tokens, voting mechanisms. I'm not a stark believer of one vote, one token, one vote. So we need more people to come in and raise these questions to bring a dialogue, change these governance models. You make it more robust. It's a very new system. Let's say BioDAOs came into existence somewhere around 2021, 2022, and it's quite new. That's why this conversation is to, like solve these issues. As you said, I wouldn't call them as gatekeepers, but as whales who have major influence over the project, yeah.
I would think that are there people working on these governance mechanics?
Yeah, there are like, so every DAO has a different working groups. Tokenomics, governance, legal, science, deal flow, product, different working groups. So anyone could contribute, anyone can participate into this process. It's not just, like there is no centralized authority, but some DAOs have centralized.
Can you show some examples?
Yeah, next I will show the kind of DAOs that are there, yeah.
The question I have is like more pertaining to ensuring that we are not replicating the things that don't work in traditional science into DeScience. Like I'm very firm about that. Now, when it comes to trust, right, how are we evaluating the applications? How are we evaluating scientists, right? Again, we're looking at things like, H-index, citation count, like all of these sort of very traditional metrics of success, and using that sort of past performance as a predictor of like, future success for some of these projects, right? And there are several scientists who, like a lot of scientists that I've spoken with, who've had, like issues with that, right? You want to move forward, you want to do something impactful, but you're pulled towards basic research because that's where the citations are and that's where, you're getting the funding. So going back to, Suramya's question about trust, right? We need to have a more transparent conversation about how we are evaluating scientists' projects, and more importantly, some of the mechanisms that are there in traditional science for de-risking investments, right? Like I'm happy to talk about grant scoring criteria and why moonshot projects don't get funded. But there's some logic there in using those scoring criteria to de-risk those investments. So how are bio DAOs going to de-risk their investments is the other real question.
Yeah, so
while at the same time maintaining that, trying to repair the bridge between science and like community needs.
For the second question, how do you de-risk?
We are 12, 17, and there's sessions back to back, so we should keep in mind the time.
Okay. So yeah, and we started 15 minutes late. Yeah. So, all right. Quickly to your question, the de-risking aspect comes from the community itself because you're getting diverse voice here. Let's say you put a debate on a proposal, a scientific proposal, right? You get a chance to hear from different set of audience. That is the de-risking, right? You get a voice from end user, like, okay, sometimes they only see the usability angle. Then you have scientists, you have researchers within the community who gives a scientific review to this project, right? And there are different perspectives coming in. I think that is the de-risking aspect that a DAO could provide. And with a trust mechanism, I would say, as of now in the platforms that I mentioned, not the DAOs, each DAOs have their own deal flow and all this. They have their vested interest. And the first platform that I showed, it is not transparent. But what we are doing as of now with the platform is any project that comes in, which has certain information to fill in the template, we would just put in. Then people will read, okay, this is some bogus project. They would not fund. If it is written properly, if there is like a legal entity attached to it, we would put all these things that they guys provide, right? We are not going to change anything. If people think, okay, it's a legit project that they want to put their money in, they can put. So that's why the risks involved in it. If we start screening, then it becomes, again, like it gets difficult if we start screening projects.
No, I understand, but just by reading something, I mean, internet is crazy about creating hype, right? They create hype and raise money and all that.
Yeah.
So you don't really you don't know whether the utility sort of comes about.
Yes, that's where like DAOs come in, like play this sort of shepherd roles, to tone down the voice. So. Yes, true. It's a DAO's goal. So DAO create hype because they have a certain funding value ecosystem that they work with. They need to attract people to, because they again like work for their particular goal. Like for example, I can directly move to this. So these are the DAOs in the ecosystem. Now you will see like where they are aligning towards. So there is CryoDAO, which their goal is to advance cryopreservation research. Then there is Athena DAO for women's health. There is Vita DAO for longevity. There is Cerebrum DAO for brain longevity. And there is Valley DAO for synthetic biology, climate tech and stuff. And there is Hair DAO for hair loss research. There is Psi DAO for psychedelic research. And there is Quantum Biology DAO for quantum biology, right? So these are areas which are somewhere ignored, or I don't know, like if you take women health, the funding from NIH is way less than what it should be, right? And CryoDAO, again, it is happening, but there are like certain like very limited labs who would do and do these research. Questionable. I think you should enter the DAO, and like I'm not participating in all of these DAOs. Yeah, I'm just part of Valley DAO. I've been part of Vita DAO for some time, but not in an active role. As a community member, I was there, but now, no. I'm just working with Valley DAOs. Yeah. It's quite centralized, yeah.
State, it is very centralized. That's because people don't understand the concept. So a lot of times, I'm in a Athena DAO, by the way, and I work with the deal flow. So a lot of times, the community members also do not understand what kind of projects need to be funded. So it falls upon the core and the deal flow to actually make sure that you cut out the noise and then present it to the community, so that then the community can vote on which out of these 5 is going to be the best project. But it has to be centralized for a while before it can go to the decentralized route.
If you are a token holder, every token holder's goal is to make their token more valuable. So in return, how would you do it is by contributing to the community's goal, which is to advance science in any other way.
No, I understand, but I'm worried about creating the same conversion that we spoke about otherwise, right? So that's all.
Yes. That's why we need people like you to ask questions inside the DAO, not from outside, right?
No, I don't know any. I'm just learning it.
These are simple questions that you can raise, and until the answer has been, answered, the question's been answered, you should ask these questions. That's what I'm here. I'm inviting everyone to participate in DAO that kind of, vibes with your goals or your way of what you want to do, and then go there and ask these questions, because these systems. Yeah, so you can you don't need to have a token. If you have a token, what you have is you can participate in voting. Token gives you the voting power. But for raising a question, you don't need to be a token holder. You can just join their Discord server and start asking these questions. Yeah.
Kishore, can I add something?
Yes.
I think for what I'm taking from this, yes, we have all these conversations about gatekeeping. I think gates are always going to be there. Keepers are always going to be there.
Yes.
But what I'm observing here is that many more doors are being created for the system. And one of the best ways to de-risk anything or make it resilient is to have more doors, have more people there, Because as of now, let's say if I want to affect uh, uh, Athena or Psi or whatever a domain, if I'm not part of, let's say, a university or a government or something, I don't get a voice to affect the science there.
Exactly.
But here, at least I can be part of it.
Yes.
I can, if I'm not contributing, I can make some comments. But it just opened more doors.
As a community, you have a voice for a particular thing that you're working for. So this is the main value creation thing. Yeah, go on.
Definitely, it is about opening more doors, but see, the common problem that all of us are discussing about is there is no valid way of producing trust without significant amount of gatekeeping, right? That's the crux of the problem that's what thematically came out. So if there is some kind of innovation we can do to solve that problem specifically, right? While the surface area is high with a lot of doors open, right? You also build some more depth with some solutions around this. Then maybe it can go in the right direction. If that an intervention can be made, yeah.
So
But I think the expectations are quite high. And as of now, if any scientist is entering a DAO, one is I think they're burning some bridges with the traditional science, right? So they are putting a lot of reputation at stake there. Next, when you put up a project on DAO and let's say you get trolled on it or it doesn't work out, you have double burned your bridges. So the stakes are high. It's not that you're part of Harvard. Harvard is going to just protect you, whatever you're going to do. You're pretty much doing this in open market. So I feel that it brings in a lot more stake. Yes, there can always be scams and people pulling through, but that can happen anywhere. But as a scientist, anybody entering this in next 10 years, they are putting a lot at stake. Unless, of course, it's a person who's not a scientist at all. Maybe there's somebody who's not a scientist at all. They just see that, okay, I can make some enterprise here, get some money. That will always be a case. Yeah.
you can see it as a, yeah, go on.
One of the things that these DAOs are doing is to let the scientists be and deal with only the science, and they take care of everything else for them, right? So when the money comes to the scientists, if they've been promised $150,000, it's going to be that $150,000. It's not going to be, of course, unless it's an IPT, which then sort of fluctuates and then changes the money pool. They make sure that the scientists get that money in the fiat currency, and they don't have to deal with the crypto side of things. But ultimately, we see it getting there when the scientists can be educated enough to get into the system to do this on their own, which is where the community power will come in, where more and more scientists will enter these DAOs.
So one quick question about trust, value creation, and like sort of timeline of projects. With at least like the standard NIH grants, like you have the money coming in once a year. The other thing there's like the main question here is more about the stability of funding, because having been on both like academic and industry funded grants, like the reason why scientists prefer academic, like sort of government funded grants is that you can count on the stability of the funding, even if say for a year you don't have any significant results, right? Whereas like with industry funding, that money can be yanked away at on short notice. So what is that, where do DAOs sort of fall in that scale, right? Because with government funded grants, it's for a fixed term. Whereas with industry, there are several conditions.
I got your question. So here, so considering the time, we only have 3 minutes. I close the session with answering your question. So I leave everything to discussion, like free to discuss with me afterwards. To answer your question, the funding is very cyclical. Let's say you proved, you brought some real outcomes out of the first funding phase. You can apply for a second grant. You can keep getting funded. So the power of this community is that there is a project coming in, which is just an idea, and then scientists and researchers de-risk it, and the funders within the community would approve this, funders or the community, patient groups and all of them, They vote on this proposal, approve this project. Once the project is approved, the research will be done. Now there is an IP. You have builders within the community who's going to turn this into a product. You have community patient groups within who can test this product and take it to the market. So you have a evergreen model of, churning out ideas into products. What I am aiming for, or the DeSci should aim for, is to make it more democratic, right? That is what DeSci is. Bring people of different walks, onboard them, and let them ask questions, right? So it will be more rigorous, more robust, and that's what DeSci should aim for. Yeah.
Given it's all about community, and I'm assuming most of these communities are online, how much of science can be done online versus in real life?
No, everything is done in real labs. Just the community is decentralized and we are in remote spots, yeah. Everything takes place in a proper lab and all of this.
I
Yeah.
understand lab. For example, if somebody is doing hair research, right? And so there are a community of people who are trying to test science in their homes or whatever, right?
Yeah, they try, they do this. There are citizen science projects. So Hair DAO, for example, they launched a shampoo by doing such citizen science. They tested on themselves, they now launched 2 shampoos. They have 6 patents, yeah. So whatever we are doing with Zugrama experiment is something like that. It's a decentralized science. And if this scales up, we can adopt it to different community gatherings, do science in a different way. Yeah. All right, thanks guys.